Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Geneva Press Club. Welcome here in Geneva and welcome online, of course. We are happy to welcome today Ending Clergy Abuse. Ending Clergy Abuse, ECA, is a worldwide organization, a Seattle-based, of human rights activists and survivors from over 17 countries and 5 continents who focus on children's abuse and victims' rights, and who joined to compel the Church and the Vatican to end clerical abuse and to seek, of course, effective justice for victims. This press conference is entitled "Survivors of Clergy Sexual Abuse and Advocates Demand the Holy See Implement a Universal Zero Tolerance Law." We have today a beautiful delegation of Ending Clergy Abuse, and we'll also have with us a co-founder of ECA, Adalbo Mendez. He's an attorney from Mexico. Is also a member of the board of Ending Clergy Abuse, and I'm happy to give him the floor right now. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alberto Mendez from Mexico, as you already heard. Today we are here in Geneva to speak about a really relevant problem that we want to address. Oh, can you hear me there? Perfect, sorry. Again. Here? Okay. So we are here in Geneva to address something really relevant, at least for the international community. That it's the clergy abuse issue around the world. We've been in Europe since 1 week ago right now, first of all in Italy, to protest about some issues that now we're going to share with you, and also to make conscious about this huge problem and a human rights problem, not only in Europe, but also around the world. With us today are ECA members, founder members of ECA, and also victims that has been joining to this cause to show this huge problem. And with me, I am going to present the panel that is with us today. First of all is Gemma Hickey from Canada. He's part of our board of directors, member of Ending Clergy Abuse, and also a survivor of abuse in Canada. Then we have Evelyn Korkmaz. She is also a survivor in Canada, but she represents the cause of indigenous persons that has been abused in Canada and other parts of the world, specifically in Canada. Sean Dougherty from SNAP, he will told us one of the first efforts from SNAP related with the first lawsuit that was presented before the International Criminal Court 10 years ago right now. Then we have Sergio Salinas and Diego Perez. They both of them come from Argentina. Sergio Salinas is the lawyer of the Provolo case, and he is coming with Diego Perez, a survivor of clergy abuse by a Argentinian priest. And his case is really relevant because it was covered by the now responsible of the maximum charge in the Vatican to investigate the cases of abuse around the world. And finally, Marco Torres, a human rights lawyer for Colombia. Also, he is a survivor of clergy abuse, and he will share with all of you how it's happening in Colombia right now with this situation. So we're going to start with Diego and Sergio. Then we're going to continue with Evelyn. Then Evelyn and Gemma. Then we're going to be with Sean, and we're going to close with Marcos, and then we're going to have a close statement for our conference. So, Sergio, Diego, adelante.
It's all right? Yeah, okay. Bueno, para mí, muchas gracias a Alberto, o doctor Alberto Méndez. Soy Sergio Salinas, como fui presentado, soy abogado penalista de Argentina. Y en primer lugar, quiero aclarar que hablo en castellano, más allá de mi dificultad con el idioma, en inglés. Lo quiero hacer porque yo le estoy hablando principalmente al Papa, que es argentino. y es muy bueno que me escuche mi propia lengua. Ese es un mensaje que queremos dar y que lo hemos decidido como grupo. Por otro lado, ser miembro y en este caso recientemente director de ECA Global es un orgullo, y también representar a Diego Pérez en esta ocasión. Puntualmente quiero traerles a colación dos aspectos fundamentales que se ha trabajado desde mi país con la colaboración en su momento de ECA Global, y actualmente ya ECA ha tomado injerencia en el caso Próbolo. El caso Próbolo, es que como me escucho estoy feliz. El caso Próbolo tiene la característica que son personas sordas, y estas personas han sido abusadas sistemáticamente en diferentes lugares del mundo. El primer lugar del mundo fue en Verona, Italia, a continuación fue en en La Plata, Argentina, y posteriormente en Mendoza, Argentina. ¿A qué se debe esto? A justamente a lo que ya el Comité de los Derechos del Niño y el Comité contra la Tortura para el 2014, tanto en febrero como en junio respectivamente, se le intimó a la Santa Sede a que deje de trasladar personas de un lugar al otro, a sacerdotes o a clérigos, porque lo único que encuentran es más víctimas y más impunidad. Ese fue justamente, como decía Alberto, el caso que demuestra en práctica cómo la conducta de encubrimiento de la Iglesia Católica fue desde Verona a La Plata a Mendoza. Esa investigación hoy todavía no llega a un fin, porque la Iglesia no entrega las pruebas. Entregó una pequeña investigación muy precaria, y es una investigación que no permite hoy saber quiénes son victimarios de ciertas víctimas. Sí se logró por la justicia penal y no la justicia canónica, como lo dije, penas de 45 años de prisión, 42 años de prisión, 18 años de prisión, 10 años de prisión para tanto curas como monaguillos. Ese caso nos ayudó a que tanto se hicieran presentaciones, que lo que quería decir, como ECA aquí, justamente en Ginebra, y que relatorías, particularmente, que ya eso lo explica mejor Alberto, se pronunciaran sobre ese encubrimiento de la Iglesia Católica. Hoy, tras ese historial que tenemos como lucha, nos toca representar el caso de Diego Pérez, y que le voy a dar la palabra a él, o bueno, vos a Alberto para mantener la forma, se lo doy yo, y a continuación hablaré como abogado del grupo en esta parte técnica de lo que él diga.
¿Qué tal? Buenos días. Bueno, quería contarle un poco sobre el caso mío. Bueno, por decirles que en su momento era un niño en situación de calle, vulnerable. La iglesia me dio techo, un lugar donde tener que pasar los días de mi vida, ¿no? En lo cual había un sacerdote que estuvo, en su momento yo creí que era una ayuda de la cual yo necesitaba para, bueno, seguir teniendo una vida o vivir bien como niño, ¿no? Crecer en un lugar de bien. El cura Eduardo Lorenzo me abusó en todo el tiempo que estuve allí, en el hogar de niños, allá en La Plata. Yo lo denuncié por el tema que me costó muchísimo salir de una persecución, porque todos los días sufría la obligación de estar acompañándolo a él. Aún así, con la denuncia en la justicia, después de 10 años de no haber conseguido nada, de haber luchado, de haber declarado en la causa, Después de 10 años la justicia ordena su detención y el cura se suicida. Y bueno, hoy eso es un peso muy grande que siento, ¿no? Porque yo no buscaba ese tipo de justicia, sino que quería que lo pague como corresponde que esté preso. Y bueno, conseguí ese tipo de justicia por parte de ellos. Víctor Fernández lo encubrió durante todo el proceso, durante todo el tiempo que fue la lucha de justicia. Aún así, encubriéndolo, también le hizo en honor su velorio, o sea, lo llevó a la casa parroquial donde ha cometido todos los abusos a despedirnos su último adiós, digamos. Le hace una misa en honor a Eduardo Lorenzo. Lo que pido es que no puede el encubridor ser la autoridad en investigaciones de abuso porque no corresponde. No está, digamos, yo he luchado en esto como para parar que no le pase a ningún niño o niña y esté sufriendo, ¿no?, abusos por parte de la iglesia, ¿no? Que uno cree que es un lugar de bien, pero lamentablemente terminamos mal, lastimados, y esto nos va a acompañar hasta el último momento de nuestras vidas. Bueno, yo lo que le pido a Francisco, al Papa, es que basta del encubrimiento y que lo destituya a Víctor Fernández del cargo que le encomendó. Eso es todo. Muchas gracias.
Si bien dije que yo iba a hablar unas palabras, creo que no tiene sentido porque fue muy claro lo que dijo Diego, así que doy la palabra a quien corresponde.
Thank you, Sergio and Diego. Now I would like to give the word to Gemma and Evelyn to talk about the situation in Canada. Please.
Thank you. My name is Evelyn Korkmas, a residential school survivor from Canada. I am also from the Anishinaabe-Eski Treaty Number 9 territory in Canada. I represent the St. Anne survivors, and we have been fighting in the courtrooms of Canada for the last 12 years to have our documents released by Canada. In 2014, Canada signed the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, along with the Catholic Church and the Assembly of First Nations. In this agreement, they promised to release our documents, and they haven't done that as of yet. In 2014, they were told by their own courts, by a court order, to release these documents. And they haven't done that, so that's a breach of the IRSSA agreement. As well, we found out later on that they made a deal with the church where they released the Catholic Church from their promise to pay for the healing of the Indigenous people across Canada. This can only mean that Canada thinks it's, above the rule of law. And this can't go on. This has to stop. Why these documents are important to us is because these documents hold our Indigenous history. They tell us who are buried in these unmarked graves. If you remember in 2000, and 22, it shocked the whole world when the world found out that there was 215 unmarked graves on school grounds. We're not supposed to have graves on school grounds. We're supposed to have playgrounds. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because there's residential schools right across Canada. And I don't know, it's so disgusting. In 2022, I met with Pope Francis in Quebec City. There I presented him with an empty box, asking him to put the residential school documents that he owes Canada and to send them back to Canada. Now, these documents hold the names of the people that are buried at these sites, where the location of these sites are. In order for the families to have closure, they need to know where their families are buried. And these documents can tell us this. This is why we need these documents. That's why they're important to us, because a lot of people ask me when I speak to the media, why do you always talk about the documents? There's so much information we can gather in these documents. The church officials were notorious for taking notes and keeping journals. These families need closure. Now, if you think this clergy abuse pandemic is just in the past, well, in June of 2023, an Indigenous girl, age 8, from Manitoba, was molested by a priest that was 48 years old. And he was only given 15 months. That was in June 2023. So this is still going on today. It's not a thing of the past. This is why we need to implement the zero tolerance in the canon law, and we needed to do it today. Not yesterday, today. And that's what we're here for. I've been here speaking to the press in 2018, 19, and 20. I had to take 2 years off because of the pandemic, and I'm back again. And I will continue coming back until zero tolerance is implemented into the canon law. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. My name is Gemma Hickey. I am an author and an activist from Canada. I am a clergy abuse survivor. I identify as transgender, non-binary, and I want to point out that I was abused by a Roman Catholic priest as a girl. It's difficult for women and girls to come forward. And so we may never know the numbers of survivors that are out there. But what we do know is that there are thousands and thousands of us. Earlier on in September, I led a small contingent of survivors and allies across rural Italy on a pilgrimage to Rome. We carried an 8-foot cross and a message to Pope Francis of zero tolerance. In my particular case, back home in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, the priest was removed but put back into another church. This has been happening not just where I'm from, but all over the world. It's a coordinated response to protect the institution of the church. The onus is on the institution of the church to do the right thing, not the survivor. And that's why we're calling on zero tolerance. Back home in St. John's, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we've had numerous allegations against priests. Some have gone to court. Others have been settled. We've had Mount Cashel Orphanage, Belvedere Orphanage, many other individual accounts of abuse. And what's happening in the United States and in Canada, in parts of the United States and Canada, is that churches are going bankrupt. And the issue with this is that these predator priests, through bankruptcy, go unnamed. Bankruptcy protects the predators and it protects the institution of the church. And so that's why zero tolerance is important. One final comment is that survivors are the ones that serve a life sentence. We live in a prison of memory, whereas many of our abusers continue on with their lives. They go free, they retire, and move on, and we are left with this. And so here we are in Rome again. It's not our first time, and we'll keep coming back, as Evelyn said. And we're calling on the church to have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to clergy sexual abuse. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Now I'm going to give the word to Sean Dougherty from SNAP to explain one of the actions made 10 years ago by SNAP before the International Criminal Court. Sean, please.
Thank you, Alberto. It is my privilege to sit here as the president of SNAP to represent the Survivors Network of those abused by priests and to give our full support to this initiative from ending clergy abuse. 10 years ago, my predecessors came to Geneva and implemented policy changes, helped to implement policy changes, and filed papers in order to get the Catholic Church to respond to their horrible behavior within childhood sexual assault. In the 10 years since my predecessors were here, many reports from around the world have been exposed. Country after country, state after state in my country, and the one thing that hasn't changed in 10 years is the survivor stories. Those stories are the same year after year. The church has changed their story a number of times over that 10 years. So I am here in Geneva to lend our support, our full support, to ending clergy abuse's March to Zero for Justice, and hopefully this time around we can actually move the ball forward enough to protect children moving forward. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you, Sean. As a final voice, before our conclusions and remarks, I want to introduce to Marco Torres from Colombia to tell us his story and also to explain the situation that it's now living Colombia related with sexual clergy abuse. Marcos.
Thank you. Gracias, Alberto. Gracias por la presentación. Mi nombre es Marcos Torres, soy abogado sobreviviente de abuso, trabajo en derechos humanos en Colombia y es importante saber, digamos, algunos hechos de Colombia. Colombia nos puede presentar una luz en términos de presentar uno de los casos como de trata de persona. En la ciudad de Villavicencio, una persona fue abusado por 34 sacerdotes por más de 10 años. Literalmente se lo pasaban de parroquia en parroquia, de mano en mano de sacerdote siendo abusado. Eso puede ser un principio importante en términos de delitos de lesa humanidad y llegar a la Corte Penal Internacional. Otro de los casos también que es muy importante y es que el nuevo arzobispo de Bogotá, José Luis, se me olvida el apellido, es un encubridor de pederasta en Colombia y aún así este papa lo nombró arzobispo de Bogotá y coincido con Diego y con Sergio que este tipo de personas no debe estar en esos cargos a partir de que han encubierto muchísimos casos de pederastia y creo que es un tema de protección de cuerpos porque no solo pasa en Colombia, como que pasa en todos los países que un sacerdote abusa aquí y simplemente lo cambian de país o hasta de parroquia. Otro de los casos que es importante, el nombre es Luis José Rueda Aparicio, que acaba de ser nombrado arzobispo de Bogotá. Otro de los casos también que es muy revictimizante y es que en algunas ocasiones las víctimas llegan a conciliaciones extrajudiciales con los sacerdotes y estos son tan descarados que los terminan denunciando por extorsión. Y eso es importante porque la Fiscalía, en colusión con el Estado y la Iglesia, no ha permitido que precisamente las víctimas puedan obtener justicia. Gracias al universo, en el año 2021, una nueva ley que se creó en Colombia declaró imprescriptible el tema del abuso sexual en menores de edad en Colombia. entendiendo que antes de esa fecha del 2021 tenía 20 años y los delitos prescribían. Y los sacerdotes continuaban y continúan violentando a los menores. Entonces es importante que esa ley, digamos, que nos sienta un precedente para la región, teniendo que hay varios países de Latinoamérica que el delito prescribe. También es importante que entendamos que la Iglesia con Colombia tiene un concordato y eso les da ciertas ventajas en términos jurídicos y no sé cómo sería la palabra, como de preventas más bien, pues para no acceder al mismo tipo de justicia penal y civil en Colombia. Entonces yo combino también como los colegas de Argentina a que Francisco revoque su decisión de nombrar tanto a Fernández como a Chunga de los cargos que acaba de nombrarlos, entendiendo que son unos encubridores de pederastias. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Marcos. As a final remarks and conclusions, when we speak about March to Zero as a ECA's campaign, we are demanding zero tolerance, zero cover-up, and truth and justice for the victims. As a part of this conclusion, I would like to share with you that from ECA, in December 3rd, 2020, we made the first step. We got the first thematic hearing before the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, demanding and asking for the Commission at least to point the situation of the cover-up by Latin American states on sexual clergy abuse in Latin America. This was the first step forward, but it's not sufficient. We need to continue on this path. As a conclusion, and I related with all that our panelists just said before, clergy abuse has specific characteristics. And one of the first things that we need to address is that we urgently need an international analysis about the legal status of the Vatican as a state, as an international subject. Because the Vatican right now, if it's having so much power, it's because he's using its specific legal status to avoid loss. The second one is like concordats has a really adverse impact on the fulfillment of the law. It has a terrible impact on countries because they are not fulfilling domestic law under the concordats. The third part is that exists a systematic practice that it's against human rights, that it's a relocation of the priests and abusers in all around the world. And that only has two adverse effects, that the abuse is spreading in different parts of the world, and the second one is that they can be prosecuted. The third one is like the Vatican is not only covering up their priests, the states and the government, the local governments are covering these priests, and they are having a specific kind or a specific agreements, with the Vatican to avoid the justice. In this case, just to give you a number, in Mexico, only 5 priests have been prosecuted by sexual abuse and more than 500 denounces. It's nothing. And finally, the economic agreements that Marcos just said. This is making a really perverse practice. They are not fulfilling the justice, and now they are taking these economic agreements to denounce the victims. International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, and UN agencies needs to start analyzing this in a non-traditional way. They need to start taking this seriously. They need to start taking this in a new reflection about human rights issues, and we need new forms of the clergy abuse under the international law. There is clearly a systematic path of abuse and a systematic covering up that could be a crime against humanity and also a genocide in specific points, like the case of Colombia, and in the case of Canada, that's the issue. And finally, this is a transitional justice issue. We need truth commissions. We need impunity commissions. We need to start fighting against these kind of practices through new international practices to start thinking about this issue as a global issue that, as Evelyn perfectly addressed, it is a pandemic and it needs to stop. So thank you very much, and please, if you have any question to our guest, please free to speak. Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass you the microphone for the question, and we'll take maybe afterwards an online question.
Good morning. Robert James Parsons, an independent journal based in Geneva. I was educated in Roman Catholic schools for 17 years, so I have some acquaintance with the church. I have 3 friends, 2 of whom became priests, one of whom stopped his training before ordination. The 3 of them were gay. They all told the same story when they spoke to their confessor about their gayness and their impulsions. They were all told, essentially, this is the temptation of the devil. Take a cold shower and say 3 Hail Marys and move on. The church still designates gayness, homosexuality, as an objective disorder. It refuses to deal with this. Now, when I was in school, we were recruited for the priesthood, and students, gay people who would later on realize they were gay, were told that because they were not drawn to women, they had a low sex drive, and this cut them out specifically. It was a sign from God that they were destined for celibacy and the priesthood. Problem is, later on, these people have no idea of what's in them and what's driving them, much less how to deal with it. I don't see any change now in the church. And this, if you look at the statistics, the majority of cases, of course, are on males of all ages. And it's a question the church refuses to deal with. There's another dimension I'd like to bring up and perhaps solicit a reaction from you, and that is this basic idea of abuse of authority. Because I know that a lot of the trauma comes from the feeling of betrayal. One trusts these people, one is taught to go to them for guidance, and instead one is hurt. And it is a tremendous abuse of authority. And unless we deal with this, the root cause remains. So you can say zero tolerance, but there's a much bigger background to it, which is not being addressed as far as I can see, or inadequately being addressed. In any event, I thank you for coming here. I thank you for speaking out. It's very important what you're doing. And please, don't stop now.
Thank you. Who'd like to? Okay, Jim Ahiki.
Hi there. Thank you for your question. I enjoyed our chat prior to the press conference. I think the issue really is with clericalism and the abuse of power, as you pointed out. I want to be careful how it's been this misconception that this issue has to do with homosexuality specifically. I think the reason why we're seeing the majority of male victims is that it's accessibility. For years, we've seen that there are only boys as altar boys, and we all know that pedophilia has to do with power and abuse of authority. And again, because of the socialization of gender within society, it is very, very difficult for women to come forward. So I want to make that clear as well. But definitely, we have to focus on systemic change within the church, and clericalism in particular, and how the heteropatriarchy within the church, how the powers are structured, prevent people from coming forward, and also from them adequately dealing with this issue.
Does someone else want to answer? Sergio Salinas, please.
Yo, antes de que me pregunten, a mí me gustaría compartir lo que el señor dijo recién y continuando el pensamiento de Gemma. Algo que estamos trabajando, que es un pensamiento del grupo jurídico, es que, si, como decía Alberto, si estamos hablando que la iglesia es como un grupo humano que ayuda a otro grupo humano, la queja es o moral o ética. Pero si estamos hablando que la iglesia es una institución, que es un Estado y las obligaciones son de un Estado como una comisaría, como un hospital público, no puede no cumplir con los deberes mínimos de una institución pública. Por lo tanto, cualquier tipo de pensamiento que tenga que ver con hombres, mujeres o cualquier clasificación que se dé, está mal. En los estados, y ese es el compliance, y eso es alguna de las ideas que estamos queriendo llevar a cabo, es exigir desde abajo, es decir, desde el ciudadano, frente a un Estado, esa tutela a nuestros derechos. Y desde arriba, que ellos cumplan sus obligaciones. Y no haya nada en el medio, moral o ético, que cambie esa opinión. Que son cuestiones aparte. Ese era un poco el agregado de Gemma. Nada más. Gracias.
Okay, we have a question online by the Swiss News Agency. So we'll have it in English. C'est à vous.
Yeah, Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. Thank you for the press conference. A bunch of questions, if I may. The first one is, so you unveiled that proposed law yesterday in Rome. Today you're in Geneva. You mentioned in the presentation a few organs, UN organs, that you're going to either meet or where you're going to deliver speeches. So what precisely do you expect from these organs in Geneva? Because you rather mention ICG, ICC, and not necessarily the organs you're going to talk to today. Then secondly, if you could elaborate on the cases you're going to deliver to the ICC and when. And thirdly, there was a few weeks ago, for the first time, a big scientific study in Switzerland, the first big report which showed the extent of the problem in Switzerland. Have you followed that, and do you have any comment? Thank you.
Okay, so who's answering for, at least for the first part, what you expect in Geneva? Adalberto Mendez.
Thank you. Well, that's a really good question, and thanks for that. Well, the meetings that we're going to have before the UN committees and the UN Human Rights Council looks two specific objectives. In 2014, the Children Rights Committe and the the Committee Against Torture published two reports related with the Vatican and how they are not fulfilling their international obligations under the on the Children's Rights Convention and Convention Against Torture. Since then, we don't know we don't have news about the official response of the Vatican to the report, and specifically if they are doing something to fulfill to those reports. That's our main task, to know what is the status of these reports and the official response of the Vatican. Then, before the Human Rights Council, what we are looking is a first encounter, at least to understand how, under an intergovernmental body on human rights protection, as the UN Human Rights Council it is, we can start pushing for some accountability on the fulfillment of human rights standards for the Vatican. The Vatican it's a specific and non-traditional international law subject under the international law, but that it's not a justification to not fulfill international obligations under the human rights law. And in The Hague, we are having an encounter with International Criminal Court, just to understand, for example, traditionally the International Criminal Court has attending just cases under war crimes, under genocide crimes, under crimes against humanity, but specifically on a war context. But genocide and crimes against humanity are not exclusive of war contexts. They are happening in other contexts different under the war. And this is one of the cases. In the case of Canada, it's a clearly case of genocide. And in the case of Colombia, maybe we're facing the first solid case of crimes against humanity committed by a church agency, and a group of priests in Colombia. That's what we want to understand. It's a first conversation to understand how is this developing under the International Criminal Court. And we really believe we are going to publish a document during the next days. Our consideration that the International Court of Justice needs to develop a consultative opinion on the legal status of Vatican under international law and how they need to deal under international obligations considering the special status. That will be the response for the first part of the question.
Okay. Do you need Laurent Sierraud to ask again the second question, Adalberto?
Sorry, what was the second question?
No, the remaining question was about Switzerland, because it was really last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, the first big report, scientific report, which was made by the University of Zurich, and that showed the extent of the problem. So the question would be, are you aware of that? So what's your comment? Do you support the local organizations of victims in Switzerland?
Yeah, indeed, in Geneva, we had one of our members is from Switzerland, and he was addressing this issue to our group that officially they were recognized around 1,000 cases, but it seems that the real number is more than 10,000. But so that's the thing, and that's the point. Officially are 1,000 cases, just officially. Imagine the real number. If the real number is more than 10,000, the problem is bigger. And I just want to take this question to compare another official data that is compared with Switzerland. Officially speaking, around the world, we are talking about that 100,000 cases, officially speaking. But if you start looking for the cases, for example, like in jurisdiction like France, just in France, you have 300,000 cases just in one country. So if we are doing this specific data, country by country, the problem is bigger. And I think the case of Switzerland, it shows us that. Just officially, they have been recognized only 1,000 cases by the church, but it seems that they are more than 10,000. So you can imagine the dimension of the problem.
Yeah. Laurent, did you have another question for Adalberto Mendez?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Is there another question here? Okay, and is there another question online? Okay, so Adalberto, you have the final word.
I just want to say thank you, and to say thank you to Gemma, to Evelyn, to Sean, to Sergio, to Diego, to Marcos, and to Denise, to Sarah, to Tim, and to Jorge, and to Diego Lavado from Argentina as well, for this opportunity. And just to remark, zero tolerance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to you, and good luck here in Geneva, and good luck for everyone. Thank you for being here today. Bye-bye. Bye-bye online too.